Hello everyone, welcome to yet another session of the daily news analysis by SRIRAM'S IAS, where we take up the important articles featuring in the Hindu newspaper and break them down for our understanding from the examination point of view. Let's take up today's articles for discussion. The articles which we'll take for discussion for today's analysis are on the screen. Let's take up the first article for the day. The first article which appears in the newspaper reads China's interventions in the Horn of Africa. Now, in our discussions in the analysis, we have been looking at Chinese activities and foreign policy quite closely, and with that we have seen that China is approaching a lot of countries such as the Indo-Pacific countries which we saw a few days earlier, that of the Pacific Island nations, the PIC. Similarly, now the Chinese is venturing into the Horn of Africa region, which are the countries part of the African continent, and it is engaging with them on the basis of military and economic cooperation. So what is China's intentions and actions with respect to the engagement in Horn of Africa? We'll look at that, and what are the different activities that Chinese are taking up in the African region and intend to take up in the future in this region. We'll take a look at that. So this topic becomes important for us first of all from the GS2 perspective, wherein we study IR and the foreign policies which affect India, and how does it affect India? We'll also take a look at that. So first is when we talk about the Horn of Africa countries, which countries are those? So this part of the African continent which looks like a horn, that is why the countries surrounding that region are known as Horn of African countries. So which countries are those which are taking part in this conference? So first of all, the conference which is being held between these countries is the China Horn of Africa Peace, Governance and Development Conference. And apart from China, the countries which are participating in this conference are Sudan, South Sudan, Uganda, Kenya, Ethiopia, Somalia, Djibouti and Eritrea. Now, the Chinese government already has a lot of interventions going on in these nations, as it's planned to engage with Africa since a long time, and it has invested a lot of money already into this region. This meet is especially special so that they can take this relationship forward. So what are the developments up until now? So the Chinese basically have put out a 2035 vision document for China-Africa cooperation, wherein it aims to transform the health sector of Africa. Now, the Chinese obviously want to invest in the African countries to develop the African region, so it wants to improve the health sector, and in the same in furtherance with doing that, in the time of pandemic, it has distributed a lot of vaccines to these countries as well. Close to 5 lakh vaccines in all these Horn of African countries. Then it wants to elevate poverty, promote trade and investments, and expand digital innovation in these African countries. And the vision also focuses on green development, capacity building, improving people-to-people exchanges, and facilitating peace and security in the continent. This is the wordings of the vision document which the Chinese have put out for its vision of developing the Horn of African region. What are the efforts that Chinese have taken for this? So China's interest and consequently its efforts are related to 4 major areas in the Horn of Africa region. What are those 4 major areas? First is the infrastructural projects, where Chinese are interested in developing the infrastructural projects in the region. Second is financial assistance for various activities. Third is interest in natural resources. We know the Chinese affinity for natural resources such as oil and gas. So similarly, the African region is extremely rich in natural oil and gas, which the Chinese want to extract. And fourth is the maritime interest. This is a common element in all its engagements which it does with the maritime countries. So with these Horn of African countries as well, it wants to strengthen its maritime interests. So we look at these points one by one as to what work it has done on these 4 areas. So on the front of infrastructure, the Chinese government and companies have already done a lot of significant work, where one of its landmark projects has been to fully fund the $200 million African Union headquarters in Addis Ababa. Now this is a city wherein the African Union headquarters is supposed to be located, and the Chinese government is to fully fund the establishment of this headquarters, so facilitating infrastructure. Then it has also made significant investments in railways in all the countries in the region, wherein it is building the Addis-Djibouti railway line, connecting the landlocked country with Eritrean ports in the Red Sea. So Eritrea, which is a coastal country wherein China has an oil terminal. We look at the terminal. So since it has the oil terminal in Eritrea, it is linking the other countries with railway lines, so this makes possible twofold interest for China. One is the development of African region, and other is Chinese interests, and Chinese trade routes are also strengthened. So this is the infrastructural development that is done by China, right? So then second is on the basis of financial assistance. What kind of financial assistance is China providing? So in significant manner, Ethiopia is one of the top 5 African recipients of Chinese investments. So the country of Ethiopia in the Horn of African region is one of the top 5 recipients of Chinese investments, and also has a debt of almost 14 billion. Now this becomes an important point of when the Chinese government supplies loans and gives financial assistance to different countries on the basis of developing infrastructure and providing them aid in their country. Consequently, these countries also come into a lot of debt with these countries. What happens to these debts? With these debts, what does the Chinese government do? We'll take a look at that in a bit. Similarly, China accounts for 67% of Kenya's bilateral debt as well. So even Kenya, where it is providing a lot of financial assistance, 67% of China's total debt, it amounts to China's share. And in 2022, China promised to provide $15.7 million assistance to Eritrea. So this is the extent of financial assistance which China is providing to these countries, which in consequence also, if they are not able to pay the money back to China, what happens is that these countries come into debt with respect to China. So that is the level of assistance as well as the debt that these countries are with respect to China. Then third is the point of natural resources, which are oil and coal, which the African region is said to be in abundance of. That is why investment of over $400 million in Mombasa oil terminal has been made by the Chinese government, wherein it wants to extract the oil resources of the region as well as transport it. And similarly, it is also interested in minerals such as gold, iron ore, precious stones, chemicals, and oil and natural gas, which is present in the Ethiopia region. So all these minerals present in the Ethiopia region, the Chinese are also interested in. And not just the natural resources. The additional fact is that the rare earth minerals, which are the new age fuels, which we know that these rare earth minerals are used in the new age technologies and equipments, such as the electric vehicles and other such equipment, and are used in the batteries of these equipments. So these rare earth minerals as well, whichever African region is in abundance of, the Chinese have laid their hands on it, and they are increasingly extracting the rare earths minerals from the African region. Not necessarily from the Horn of African region, but from the downward countries of Africa. This is the Chinese efforts on extracting the oil and natural resources from the country. Then fourth is the maritime interest. Now this becomes one of the most important factors for China, where we have been looking at its expansionist policies, where using its increasing economic clout and power, it wants to take over and establish its stronghold over a lot of places in the world order, and with that it wants to secure its place in the maritime regions. That is why it keeps engaging with a lot of countries. Similarly, with respect to the African coast, China's first and only military base outside its mainland is in Djibouti. So this is a significant development where it has a military base in Djibouti. Why does it have a military base in Djibouti? Let's look at the position of Djibouti over here. Djibouti stands, this country of Djibouti, can we see that it stands at a very critical juncture between this water body and this water body. Which is this water body? This is the Red Sea. And which is this water body? This is either the Arabian Sea, extended Arabian Sea, which opens into the Indian Ocean, right? And which is this strait known as, this is the Strait of Bab el-Mandeb. This strait is a very critical strait because, as we can see, it joins the European region through the Suez Canal through the to the Indian Ocean region, which makes it very critical for very critical a point for the international sea route. And that is why China, by placing a military base in the region of Djibouti, is wanting to secure its position in this international sea route, as to whenever a crucial time is to occur, it can make use of this military base. So this is the thinking for securing the maritime interest for China. And similar work is being done, also planned to develop the Eritrea's coast to secure its other resources in the landlocked countries, so that if it develops Eritrea's coast and develops transport facilities from the coast, it can more easily facilitate and transport the resources which are there in the other landlocked countries. So in this way, China is fulfilling or strengthening its maritime interest. So what do we take away from this engagement that is going on? That China is able to fulfill a lot of its interest from the African region, where it is also able to tap on the resources, where it is also able to secure maritime interests. But what benefit are the African countries getting? Are the African countries apprehensive of the relationship with China? As of now, the African countries are not apprehensive and are quite okay with the relationship with China, because in return, with Chinese presence, they get to develop the infrastructure in their country. Is there any downside to this development? As we can see, the rising amount of debt which was increasing, where we saw that Kenya's 67% bilateral debt belongs with China, and Ethiopia is in debt with that of $14 billion with respect to China. So what happens is that when a lot of money is being supplied by China to these countries who do not have the immediate capacity to pay back to China, what that results into is a debt trap. And this is known as increasingly the debt trap policy or debt trap diplomacy, which a lot of experts are identifying that China indulges into. Are there any instances of this debt trap diplomacy? An very stark example is that of Sri Lanka. China did the same with Sri Lanka, wherein it went to the Sri Lankan government, said that we want to develop Sri Lanka's infrastructure, and consequently it developed a port which is known as the Hambantota port in the region of Sri Lanka. It developed the port, but when the Sri Lankan government, which we know is in grave economic crisis, was not able to repay the loan back to China, what China asked for is that you lease the Hambantota port to us for 99 years. And in that way, the Hambantota port has now gone into the Chinese hands. This is the concept of Chinese debt trap diplomacy, which is increasingly seen as a development, which China refutes time and again, but as a development we can observe as to what happens when China indulges with such nations. So this is a point which we need to observe closely from the international relations point of view, and whenever we find an question relating to this in the examination, we can answer this accordingly. Attached to this, what are India's efforts in the African region? Let's look at some of those examples. Now, India's investment in Africa, India follows a policy of genuine help in Africa, wherein it has also increasingly helped Africa in a lot of infrastructure projects and health sector, where it has significantly contributed into the telemedicine sector. So India believes in the policy of helping African countries. So therefore, India is investing in capacity building, providing more than $1 billion in technical assistance and training to personnel under the Indian Technical and Economic Cooperation, or the ITEC program. So as we can see, India wants to indulge in capacity building and assistance and training to the personnel, which would increase the human resource capacity of the African countries. As a full member of the African Capacity Building Foundation, India has pledged $1 million towards ACBF's, or the African Capacity Building Foundation's Sustainable Development, Poverty Alleviation and Capacity Building Initiative. So India also has continuously been contributing towards African efforts for increasing its capacity. And then it has invested $100 million in the Pan-African e-network to bridge the digital divide in Africa, leveraging its strengths in information technology. As I said, India has heavily invested in developing the telemedicine structure in Africa, wherein since there is a acute shortage of health personnel in the African countries, health personnel from India can via internet services and via these online services can provide consultation to these African countries, which is known as telemedicine. India has invested in that as well. And then Indian military academies offer training to military officers from a number of African states. So India provides military training as well, and it has also unveiled the vision document of the Asian African Growth Corridor, which is jointly prepared by Indian and Japanese think tanks, which says that it will focus on developing cooperation projects, quality infrastructure and institutional connectivity, skill enhancement and people-to-people partnership. So even India is on the lines of engaging with Africa and maintaining its healthy relationship with the African countries, and sort of not indulge into these policies of debt trap diplomacy. This was a background that we studied for the African relations with that of China, how China is engaging and what are the efforts that India is taking. With this, let's move on to our next article for the day. The next article which appears in the newspaper, which again relates to China, is the G7 plan to counter the Belt and Road Initiative. Now, all of these articles, all of these events are happening increasingly in the world due to the rising policies of China. Since the China is taking strong strides ahead of asserting dominance in the world order, therefore other countries as well are also grappling and also struggling and also putting their efforts to counter Chinese efforts. So one such efforts in the recently concluded G7 summit is the counter plan by G7 countries, which is known as the PGII, or which is known as the Partnership for Global Infrastructure and Investment. That is the full form for PGII. Now, what is this PGII? It is being seen as the G7's counter to China's multi-trillion-dollar Belt and Road Initiative. What is the China's Belt and Road Initiative? China's Belt and Road Initiative actually is the modern Silk Route, which the China is wanting to emulate along with the new age maritime Silk Route as well. We know that there was an ancient Silk Route which the Chinese used to trade with the European and other aligned countries. The Chinese want to recreate this Silk Route via modern infrastructural capabilities and also formulate a new maritime route as well, which connects from the Indian Ocean and the South China Sea and other places. So this is together known as the Belt and Road Initiative, which is a multi-trillion-dollar project, using which China not just wants to increase connectivity with itself with these other countries, but also possibly secure a lot of its military interests. That is why G7 countries want to counter this initiative with this new initiative that it has brought. What is this new initiative? It wants to build connectivity, infrastructure and trade projects which they want to execute it in Asia, Europe, Africa and Latin America. So similar to the lines of this Belt and Road Initiative, there are some similarities as well as some differences. So similarities are they also want to indulge into similar areas such as connectivity, increasing infrastructure in countries such as Asian and other Europe, African and Latin American countries, especially those which are low and middle income countries. So the US along with G7 partners, that is the UK, Japan, France, Canada, Germany, Italy and the European Union, had in 2021 announced the launch of the Build Back Better World. This was a version of this new PGII partnership which was known as the B3W or Build Back the Better World. But due to some reasons it was not able to fructify at that point of time. And this new PGI is therefore a relaunch of Biden's B3W plan. Which is what exactly are they wanting to do? Like I said, they are formulating this plan which is a $600 million plan, right? This $600 billion plan to increase the infrastructure level and connectivity level in the low and middle income countries. That is why it is being touted as a value-based plan to help underfunded low and middle income countries meet their infrastructure need. This has been shown as the original objective and the fundamental objective of this new partnership. So how does it aim to increase and execute these projects? It aims to tackle the climate crisis and ensure global energy security through clean energy supply. So it will aid these low and middle income countries who struggle with funds to even manage conventional energy resources. It will help these countries with establishing clean energy mechanisms. And second, the projects will focus on bolstering digital information and communications technology. We know that the importance of internet and communication technology is very significant in today's world, and these countries which do not have access to it, the PGII partnership is going to supplement these countries by enhancing their digital capacities and networks, facilitating technologies such as 5G and 6G internet connectivity and cyber security. And third, the projects aim to advance gender equality and equity, and lastly, to build and upgrade global health infrastructure, such as building vaccine facility. So it has announced that it is going to build a vaccine facility in the African region, wherein the people of African countries were not able to access the vaccines on time, which we saw during the pandemic. And by building this vaccine manufacturing facility, they want to bridge this gap. With respect to India, what are the plans? With respect to India, the PGII partnership is wanting to indulge into rural agricultural modernization, wherein they have instituted a fund to facilitate innovative projects which uplift the condition of rural agriculture. That is what they are intervening in the Indian subcontinent region with respect to Indian countries specifically, right? Now, what are the similarities and differences with respect to the BRI and PGII? Now, the funding of the PGII is around $600 billion as we saw, but the China's Belt and Road Initiative, according to Morgan & Stanley, estimate that China's project is about $1.2 to $1.3 trillion, which is still the figure which is said that the actual funding can be higher than this. And 89% of the contractors participating in the BRI projects are Chinese contractors. So first of all, the funding amount of both the projects, we can see that there is a lot of difference, where the Belt and Road Initiative is much extensive, which was launched in 2013. And it's quite extensive in terms of its connectivity as well as the amount expenditure on it. Whereas the PGII has $600 billion assigned to it. And secondly, while the project is being carried out in for BRI from the Chinese contractors itself, in the PGII partnership or the G7 projects, much of the projects will be carried out by the private and other countries' contractors. So this is the difference between China's Belt and Road Initiative and the G7 plan for increasing connectivity in the low and middle income countries, right? With this, let's move on to our next article for the day. The next article which appears in the newspaper reads, BJP seeks floor test in the House and CM makes fresh plea to the rebels. Now, this article, as we must all be looking at the political crisis that is going on in Maharashtra, is pertaining to that, and the important point which we need to extract from this and analyze from the examination point of view is of the concept of floor test. As to what exactly is a floor test, what does it mean, what is happening in the Maharashtrian region, and what is the other concept that we can derive from this. So let's first understand the crisis in Maharashtra. What exactly is happening, what exactly has happened until now. What happened is that the government which is there in Maharashtra is belonging to a coalition known as the MVA or Mahavikas Aghadi. Now, this is a coalition between three parties. One is the Shiv Sena, other is the Congress, and other is the NCP or the Nationalist Congress Party. Now, and the CM, who is Uddhav Thackeray, belongs to the ruling Shiv Sena party. Now, what happened is that the second in line from the Shiv Sena party, who along with other MLAs who are now known as the rebel MLAs, they want to split from the party. They want to leave the party and join another party or form the government through other means. So in this way, the rebel MLAs who now say that they are more than 30 in number, they with increasing days their strength is increasing as to how many rebel MLAs are together and are leaving the Shiv Sena party. So currently it's being said that there are more than 40 or around 40 rebel MLAs who are there, who want to move away from the ruling party of Shiv Sena and do not want to associate with this ruling coalition. What would this result into? This would result into the lacking of majority by this coalition, and what would that amount to? It would amount to falling of the government in Maharashtra. That is why this whole political crisis has started in Maharashtra. So now these rebel MLAs first flew to Surat and then now are housed in Guwahati, so that they cannot be approached by the ruling party government, or no such transactions can happen between them which would foil the plans of these rebel MLAs. So that is why now they are situated elsewhere, wanting to break away from the party of Shiv Sena and form a government through other means. Okay, this has happened now. Then what happened? What can the ruling government do? Can this be the case of anti-defection, since a lot of members of the elected members of the party are going away? This is where the role of anti-defection law came in, wherein the anti-defection law talks about protection of defection of MLAs in this aspect only. But the anti-defection law says that if any member voluntarily resigns from a party, he is liable to be disqualified, or if he does not follow the orders of the party whip, then he is liable to be disqualified. We had looked at the grounds for disqualification. So in this manner, the CM a few days ago called for an all legislators meet, which meant that if the MLAs are not attending the meeting, it would mean that these MLAs are voluntarily giving up their membership of the party, which would be make them liable for disqualification. Alright, that happened, and obviously these MLAs, rebel MLAs being in Guwahati, did not come into the meeting, which gave the CM and the ruling government a ground to disqualify them from their positions. So this became a ground. But are there any protections under the anti-defections law for these rebel MLAs? The anti-defection law does have certain protections which say that one elected member resigning from the party, he or she becomes liable for disqualification. But if two-thirds of the whole two-third members of the political party split away from that party, then those two-third members would not be liable for would not be liable under the anti-defection law. But the condition is that these two-third members should split from the party and merge into some other party. So the splitting of from the original party and their merger into some other party is the prerequisite. So now as these rebel MLAs stand, they will have to, if at all, they muster the 2/3 majority for them. If at all they do, then they clear the first pedestal of clearing the 2/3 majority for splitting, and then they would have to merge with another political party. So this is the condition for them. Now this has happened. Now what has happened? Since the government is now short of these MLAs and these rebel MLAs have taken away their support, the government can fall short of proving the majority. This is where the other rival party can come up and ask for a floor test, wherein it will ask the ruling government to prove its majority in the house. So within this aspect, let's look at the concept of floor test. What is a floor test? Wherein the BJP is asking the governor of Maharashtra to call for floor test. So the first thing that is done is that whenever a party is asking to prove another ruling party to prove its majority in the state legislative assembly, the application or motion is to be made to the governor, who calls for the floor test. And the Supreme Court held that a governor can call for a trust vote or a confidence motion. These are all names given to these concepts. If he or she has arrived at a prima facie opinion but cannot take any party's side. So the right to call for a floor test or a trust vote or a confidence motion belongs with the governor, and he can apply his discretion in calling for the trust vote. And the governor need not wait for the speaker's decision on the resignation of rebel MLAs of Legislative Assembly or MLAs before calling for a trust vote. So as I said, the governor has the discretion for calling for a trust vote, and it need not wait for the speaker's decision. In the anti-defection law, who takes decisions on the disqualification of these rebel MLAs is the speaker who takes the decision. So in this manner, what is the trust vote? A trust vote or a floor test is nothing but a confidence motion or a vote of confidence, or a trust vote is sought by the government in power on the floor of the house. It is basically a motion sought to the government in power where they are required to show their majority or show their strength in the house. It enables the elected representatives to determine if the Council of Ministers commanded the confidence of the house, to test the majority. The idea underlying the trust vote is to uphold the political accountability of the elected government to the state legislature, right? This is obvious, wherein, why does this happen? Because in order to prove the majority, whether or not a ruling party has the majority seats in the house or not, it is to ensure political accountability, because only when a party has the required majority seats should it be allowed to form a government. That is the principle behind it. And what is a no confidence motion? Similarly, a no confidence motion or a vote of no confidence or a no trust vote can be sought by any house member. So it can be sought by any house member to express that the ruling party no longer has the confidence in the government. So that is the concept of a trust vote or confidence motion and a no confidence motion. Now, floor test is a term used for the test of the majority, as we saw, and if there are any doubts against the chief minister of a state, he or she can be asked to prove the majority in the state. In case of a coalition government, which is the case in Maharashtra, the CM may be asked to move a vote of confidence and win a majority. This is what the rival party is seeking. And in the absence of a clear majority, when there is more than one individual staking claim to form the government, the governor, who has the discretion, may call for a special session to see who has the majority to form the government. This is the crisis that is unfolding, and in this manner, some legislator may be absent or choose not to vote whenever such a trust vote happens, and the numbers are then considered based only on those MLAs who were present to vote. So this is the concept which we have to understand in the underlying crisis, political crisis that is going on in Maharashtra. So this is the concept of floor test or a trust vote or a confidence motion. With this, let's take a look at a similar linking article to this crisis, which appears in the editorial page, which talks about the essence of time. Now, as we were looking at the crisis, where we saw that these rebel MLAs were now housed in Guwahati, and the CM had called them for a meeting and they did not attend the meeting, which created a ground for the ruling party to disqualify them. Now, what happened? How do they initiate the disqualification proceeding? The speaker has to send a notice to these rebel MLAs. So, in this case, the speaker being absent from the house, this power was given to the deputy speaker, who becomes the presiding officer in this case. So, when the deputy speaker becomes the presiding officer, he supplied the notice to these rebel MLAs, who in turn what they did was they promulgated a motion in the state legislature that they object with the appointment of the deputy speaker and they seek the removal of this deputy speaker. That is what they did with respect to the position of deputy speaker. And now when the matter went to the Supreme Court with respect to what can be done to the crisis, the relief that Supreme Court has given is to the rebel MLAs, wherein it has given them relief by lengthening their disqualification proceeding, because there is a question mark on the position of the deputy speaker, wherein the Supreme Court has said that if there are any motion or if there are any motions which are instituted in the legislature against the removal of the speaker or deputy speaker, then in that case the deputy speaker cannot hold the power to decide on the disqualification proceeding, which is why the Supreme Court has granted a relief to these rebel MLAs. So what does this do? This creates a very important question which the Supreme Court will answer on July 12, which is the next hearing of this case, wherein the Supreme Court will answer a crucial question, which means that if the deputy speaker or speaker is the authority, presiding authority to discuss or to decide on the matter of disqualification of rebel MLAs, if these rebel MLAs institute a removal motion in the legislature itself, thereby trying to undermine the authority of the speaker or deputy speaker, what happens in that case? And this is what the editorial is talking about, that the Supreme Court needs to take a fair decision on this matter, so that again the anti-defection law, which we're looking at a lot of flaws, which a lot of elected members get their way around this law and use it to their advantage, this should again not become a flaw for the law, wherein the speaker or deputy speaker, who is the presiding officer, to discuss the matters of disqualification. If at all any removal motion is instituted against him or her, it becomes a defunct matter over there, wherein the jurisdiction of the speaker or deputy speaker comes into the question. So this is the point of this article. So it remains to be seen what the Supreme Court takes a stand on the position of the speaker and deputy speaker and the jurisdiction of the authority, if at all any removal motion for against him or her is instituted. With this, we come to the end of today's discussion. We'll meet again tomorrow with the important articles for the day. Thank you.